we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
Now, back to the After Practice podcast with Lake Lewis.
Welcome to another After Practice podcast. I'm your host, Lake Lewis Jr. Appreciate you joining me. As you know, on this show, we talk about the Washington Commanders. And look, folks, they're 4-9 on the season. I don't think most people thought it would be this bad, but here we are. And the question I'm going to ask you guys today is, what do you want to see from this football team over the final 4 games of the season? There's 1 quarter left for their season. They're not going to make the playoffs, most likely. I think they're probably already eliminated. So what do you want to see from this team? You know, there are a couple building blocks perhaps on the roster. Perhaps Sam Howell could be the quarterback of the future for this team. He still has to improve as well. Obviously there's the thought of what's going to happen with Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator. Does he get an opportunity to become a head coach for the first time in his career, or does the team move on? I think there's so many questions right now that need to be asked about the organization. New ownership, Josh Harris, has come in, and he hasn't done anything as far as a knee-jerk reaction, because I think a lot of us in the media, as well as you, the fans, probably thought Ron Rivera was going to get fired at some point this season. Well, he hasn't. And I think the way that has gone about is because Ron Rivera is a respected person in the league. And Ron Rivera, whether we want to admit it or not, Ron Rivera's done his job as far as bringing credibility as far as the organization. And I understand they're not credible as far as winning, as far as the X's and O's. But Ron Rivera was tasked with coming to Washington and changing a toxic culture. And not so much on the field, but the way they did business, the way the old ownership group, had the legal suits, lawsuits and things like that, the sexual harassment filings. There were so many things that were going on in the organization that shouldn't be happening and shouldn't have happened. Well, that's where Ron Rivera was brought in to clean that up. And I think for the most part, he's done that. He's brought a sense of a professional outfit. They're just not getting it done on the field as far as X's and O's, and that was never his strength. So I think you have to give him credit as far as what he was tasked to do outside of football. Now, they have to bring in someone that's going to get it done on the field. And I think for Washington, it's time for them to really, hit the pavement, really get this thing going where they're looking at every possible candidate. And some of these candidates have to be young guns. There's so many around the league right now that all they need is an opportunity. They just need a chance. And unfortunately, several of those guys used to be in Washington on the coaching staff under, Mike Shanahan, under Jay Gruden. And they never were given those opportunities. They went elsewhere and they've succeeded. They've actually, one of those guys, Sean McVay, has a Super Bowl trophy. So I think if you're Washington, you can't miss the opportunity this time. You've got to look at every possible avenue. You can't leave any stone unturned as far as bringing in your next coach, but you have to bring in a GM first. I think the way to do it this time is to get a real football guy in, maybe pluck a guy from another high-profile team that's doing well. I mean, listen, the Philadelphia Eagles, San Francisco 49ers, Dallas Cowboys, all of these teams are successful right now in the NFC. Then you look at the Detroit Lions. I mean, there's so many younger teams that are doing well with younger coaches too, by the way. So I think if you're the Commanders, you can just look at the blueprints that were laid out in front of you by teams that are in your conference. Heck, 2 teams in your division, let alone in your conference. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and teams like that, yeah, they may have an older figure, running them as far as an Andy Reid. But I still think that if you're Washington, it's time now to go young. It's time to go innovation, bring in an innovative guy that can change things for you and get this thing going. You're going to have a lot of cap space. You're going to have a lot of, opportunities to bring in some free agents because it is a new outfit. There's no more Dan Snyder around. There's no more toxic setting around, okay? You have a sports owner in Josh Harris. You have Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson smiles at you. I'm sure pretty much any athlete will listen, okay? So now there's opportunities there. You're going to have high draft picks. You're probably going to be picking within the top 4 or 5 as far as the first round of the NFL draft. You're going to have 2 second-round draft picks. You're going to have a multitude of other picks in this draft. So Washington could get fat quickly if they go about it the right way. You cannot miss on your draft picks the way they have in years past. You can't miss. This is the one year that you can change your fortunes quickly if you do it the right way. I think for this organization, the sky's the limit if they can find the right people to run the organization the right way. And I mean that for as far as X's and O's on the field. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. They've got a game coming up, Sunday, and it's going to be interesting to see how things will go out in Los Angeles against the Rams. The Rams had a tough loss against the Ravens, a game that they almost pulled out in Baltimore in soggy conditions, but they're playing much better. They're still not out of a wild card spot, so the Rams still have something to play for too at home. And obviously Sean McVay has history with the Washington Commanders, so it still would be a compelling and interesting matchup. But for Washington not to fall to 4-10, they're going to have to put the last few weeks behind them, and hopefully the bye week that they're coming off gave them that opportunity to put everything that had been going on, the loss to the Giants, the debacle against the Dolphins. I mean, there were so many bad outings leading up into their bye. Now they have an opportunity to hit the ground running and try to win, a couple games out of your last 4, maybe even try to win all 4. It would get them back up to 8 wins, and that seems to be the mark for this franchise over the last 3-4 years under Rivera. They've toiled around 7 and 8 wins every season. Would not surprise me to see them, closer to that mark. I don't think they're going to get to 8 though, because they still have, the Cowboys, the 49ers. They still have some tough games. That game in New York against the Jets now does not look easy at all. The Jets had a big win yesterday. And then we just talked about the Rams, of course, who are still trying to get into the NFC playoffs. So it's going to be interesting, folks. Thought I'd jump on there real quick and give you my thoughts as we prep this week for our trip out to Los Angeles, where the Washington Commanders will take on the Los Angeles Rams. Man, I got to remember to say that a couple times now. Yes, the Washington Commanders against the Los Angeles Rams this Sunday, the 17th in Los Angeles, 4 p.m. start. As always, folks, you can follow me on social media, on Twitter at Lake Lewis, on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. You can also check us out on sportsjourney.com and on social media at sportsjourney.com. Always appreciate you guys joining me. And as always, again, have a good one. Be safe.